Your numbers don't add up to anything meaningful. Trevor Hastings said it with a smile, like he was doing me a favor. His voice echoed across the trading floor, where 63 of my colleagues pretended to focus on their screens. He was 29 years old and looked like someone had assembled him from a catalog of investment bankers. Charcoal suit with too much sheen, cufflinks that probably cost more than my monthly rent, a watch that screamed insecurity. His title was Chief Financial Officer, which meant he'd been here exactly 8 weeks and thought he understood high-frequency trading. I sat across from him in the glass-walled office, my hands resting calmly on my knees. My tablet was off, sitting on the table between us. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. After 11 years of building proprietary trading algorithms for this firm, you learn that explaining yourself to idiots is just wasted breath. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just a quantitative analyst. I was the algorithm. Every profitable trade this firm executed ran through models I'd designed. And in exactly 2 weeks, he'd understand the difference between numbers that don't add up and a $42 million loss. I'm Victoria Chen. My official title is Senior Quantitative Strategist at Meridian Capital Partners. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? It's a polite way of saying I'm the person who writes the mathematical models that tell our traders when to buy and sell. I'm the invisible mathematician behind a $200 million trading operation. My job is to find patterns in market chaos, to predict price movements before they happen, to turn data into profit. For 11 years, I've been the brain behind Meridian's quantitative trading desk. The office smells like expensive cologne and the faint electrical buzz of server banks 2 floors below, while everyone else is on the trading floor screaming into phones and watching Bloomberg terminals. I'm in a quiet corner office writing code that makes decisions faster than any human can think. I'm the reason our high-frequency trading desk averages 17% returns annually. I'm the reason we outperform our competitors by 8 percentage points. I'm the only person who understands how our proprietary models actually work. The algorithms I built are elegant and brutal. They analyze thousands of data points per second: market prices, volume patterns, news sentiment, correlation matrices, volatility surfaces. They execute trades in microseconds, buying low and selling high before human traders even notice the opportunity. When I started at Meridian 11 years ago, we were executing trades manually, traders making decisions based on gut feel and experience. Sometimes they were right, sometimes wrong. The firm was profitable, but barely. I spent 4 years building the infrastructure, teaching machines to recognize patterns that humans miss, creating models that could predict price movements with 73% accuracy, developing risk management systems that prevented catastrophic losses. It worked so perfectly that people forgot it took work to maintain. They started thinking the profits just happened naturally, that the algorithms ran themselves without someone constantly updating them, testing them, optimizing them. That's the curse of being excellent at invisible work. When everything succeeds, people assume it's automatic. They forget there's a person behind the models, making thousands of micro decisions that separate profit from disaster. I completed 87 major model updates during my time here. Every single one increased profitability or reduced risk. Every single one delivered exactly what I promised. But here's what made me truly essential: the core trading algorithms, what I called the Apex system, existed only in my secure repository. Company policy said all code should be in the shared system. I'd been planning to migrate it for 11 years. But there was always another market crisis to navigate, another strategy to develop, another deadline that couldn't wait. And maybe, somewhere deep down, I understood that being the sole custodian of the firm's profit engine gave me leverage. I was wrong about what kind of leverage it gave me. Then came Trevor Hastings. He wasn't hired through normal channels. He was installed by the new majority shareholder. Meridian had been acquired 6 months ago by Sentinel Holdings, a private equity firm known for aggressive cost-cutting. Hastings came from their portfolio, a former CFO at some logistics company they'd gutted and sold. He had an MBA from Columbia and 3 years of experience making spreadsheets look good. Zero experience in quantitative finance. Zero understanding of algorithmic trading. Zero respect for anything he couldn't see on a balance sheet. His first week, he called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. He stood at the front wearing his expensive suit and told us about his vision for operational efficiency. He used phrases like margin optimization and cost structure rationalization and resource reallocation. He talked about eliminating redundant positions and consolidating functions. I sat in the back row watching traders exchange nervous glances. What he was actually announcing was that he planned to fire people to improve the quarterly numbers. His second week, he terminated the head of risk management. Daniel had been with Meridian for 16 years. He understood market dynamics, crisis scenarios, the difference between calculated risk and gambling. Hastings fired him in a 10-minute meeting and replaced him with a 26-year-old analyst who'd worked at Sentinel for 18 months. The new risk manager didn't know what a volatility smile was, but he was cheap, and he wouldn't question Hastings' decisions. His third week, Hastings started auditing every department, looking for positions to eliminate, functions to outsource, costs to cut. People started updating their resumes. The trading floor, usually loud with activity, became subdued and tense. Hastings seemed to enjoy the fear, the power of making people wonder if they'd survive the next round of cuts. I knew I was in his crosshairs because my salary was visible on his spreadsheets. Senior quantitative strategist, $340,000 annually, plus bonuses that sometimes doubled that. To someone like Hastings, I was just an expensive line item. During his fifth week, he sent me a meeting invitation, 3 p.m. on a Thursday, his office, subject line, comp structure discussion. I showed up exactly on time. He kept me waiting in the hallway for 15 minutes while he finished a call with someone in New York. When he finally waved me in, he didn't offer me a seat. "Walk me through your contribution to the firm's profitability," he said, eyes fixed on his laptop. I explained the Apex system, the high-frequency trading algorithms, the predictive models, the risk management frameworks. He interrupted after 45 seconds. "So you write computer code?" "I design and maintain quantitative trading strategies." I corrected. "Right, code," he said, finally looking at me. "Here's my issue. You're our highest paid non-partner employee, but I can't find clear metrics showing your direct contribution to revenue." I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. "The quantitative desk generates $63 million annually. Those are my algorithms." "Those are the firm's algorithms," he corrected. "Built using the firm's resources on the firm's time. And from what I understand, any competent programmer could maintain them." Any competent programmer. 11 years of work, reduced to basic programming. "Is that what your analysis shows?" I asked calmly. "My analysis shows your compensation is 55% above market benchmark for similar roles," he said, turning his laptop to show me a spreadsheet. "I've identified several qualified candidates who could perform your functions at substantially lower cost." I looked at his spreadsheet. He'd compared me to data analysts and junior quants, people who implemented models, not designed them. It was like comparing an architect to someone who painted walls. "I see," I said quietly. "I'm proposing a compensation adjustment," Hastings continued, "reduction to market rate, which would be approximately $190,000. Or if you're not comfortable with that, we can discuss a transition timeline." He was offering me a 60% pay cut or a polite firing. "I'll need to think about it," I said. "You have until Monday," he replied, already looking back at his laptop. I walked out of his office knowing exactly what was coming, but I wasn't angry, not yet, because I understood something Hastings didn't. I understood exactly how fragile the firm's profits were without me. The next week was surreal. Hastings started treating me like a problem he'd already solved. In meetings, he'd talk about streamlining our quantitative operations and right-sizing our analytics function. Everyone knew what he meant. Other traders started avoiding me, like my impending termination was contagious. Like being associated with someone Hastings targeted might put them on the list too. I kept working, monitoring the models, adjusting parameters, keeping the Apex system running smoothly. Nobody thanked me. Nobody acknowledged that the daily profit reports they celebrated were generated by my algorithms. That's the nature of quantitative work. It's only noticed when it fails. On Monday morning, I got another meeting invitation, 10 a.m., Hastings' office. Subject line, follow-up discussion. I knew what it was. I arrived 5 minutes early. This time, the head of HR was waiting in the hallway with me. Marcus from Human Resources, holding a manila envelope. We didn't make small talk. When Hastings called us in, the setup was familiar. Him behind the desk, 2 chairs facing him. The power dynamic crystal clear. Victoria, I've given considerable thought to our discussion last week. Hastings began. He hadn't given it any thought. He'd already made his decision before our first meeting. After reviewing your role and compensation structure, I've determined we need to make a change. Effective immediately. We're eliminating your position. And my heart rate stayed steady. I'd been expecting this for a week. Can I ask why? I said calmly. Your contribution to the firm, while historical, doesn't justify your current compensation level, he said. 11 years of work, 87 successful model implementations. Historical. The quantitative strategies you've developed will continue to generate value, he continued. But we're moving toward a more cost-effective operational structure. Through the glass walls of his office, I could see the trading floor, 63 people at their desks, trying not to look at us. But they were all watching. This was Hastings making a statement, showing everyone that even the highest paid, most senior employees weren't safe, that he had the power to eliminate anyone who didn't fit his spreadsheet. Arthur Pemberton, the founding partner who'd hired me 11 years ago, wasn't even in the office. He was at a conference in London. The man who'd personally approved my last 5 raises, who'd praised my work in quarterly meetings, who'd told me I was the firm's competitive advantage. He wasn't here to stop this. You'll receive 8 weeks of severance, Marcus from HR said, sliding the envelope across the desk. Your access credentials will be deactivated when you leave the building. Please return your badge and company devices before departing. I looked at Hastings. His expression was neutral, professional. He thought he'd made a shrewd business decision, eliminated an expensive employee, kept the profitable algorithms. What he'd actually done was activated a self-destruct sequence he didn't know existed. I understand, I said softly. My voice was level, no emotion showing. I stood up slowly, picked up my bag, removed my badge from around my neck. I placed it gently on Hastings' desk. Then I looked directly at him and said 4 words. Check the correlation matrices. His brow furrowed slightly. He had no idea what I was talking about. I walked out of that office with my shoulders back. Past the trading floor, where colleagues studiously avoided my eyes. Past the reception area where Sarah had always greeted me warmly. She was crying quietly at her desk. I took the elevator down 42 floors. Walked through the marble lobby with its abstract sculptures and designer furniture, pushed through the revolving doors into the October morning, and that's when I allowed myself to smile. Before I tell you how Hastings managed to lose $42 million in 14 trading days, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and give this a like. Because what happens next is a masterclass in understanding what you're actually paying for. Now, back to Hastings, who at that exact moment was celebrating with his team from Sentinel Holdings. What they didn't know, what nobody in that building understood, was that I wasn't just the person who wrote the trading algorithms. I was the algorithms. Every line of code in the Apex system reflected my understanding of market microstructure. Not just mathematical formulas, but intuition developed over 11 years of watching how markets actually behave. Sure, the code existed in the repository, but that code was just the skeleton. The real intelligence, The part that made the system profitable lived in the constant adjustments I made. Daily recalibrations based on market conditions, parameter updates when volatility patterns shifted, risk limit modifications when correlation structures changed. The APEX system wasn't a static program you could just run forever. It was a living strategy that required constant attention and expertise. Without that attention, it would continue executing trades. But it would be trading on outdated assumptions, stale parameters, obsolete risk models, like driving a car with the brake lines slowly wearing out. Everything seems fine until you need to stop. Here's what Hastings didn't understand about quantitative trading. He thought algorithms were like spreadsheet formulas. You write them once, they work forever. But market dynamics change constantly. Correlation patterns shift. Volatility regimes evolve. Liquidity conditions transform. An algorithm that made money last month can lose money this month if the underlying market structure has changed. Profitable trading requires constant adaptation. The APEX system I'd built was sophisticated enough to recognize certain patterns and adjust automatically. But it still needed human oversight for the complex decisions. When to increase position sizes in favorable conditions. When to reduce exposure during unusual volatility. When to shut down completely during market dislocations. I'd made those decisions every single day for 11 years. I'd programmed safety limits into the system, of course. Maximum position sizes, loss thresholds, volatility cutoffs. But I'd calibrated those limits based on normal market conditions and my own judgment. Without me monitoring it, the system would continue trading until it hit those limits. And the limits I'd set were designed to protect against catastrophic losses, not gradual deterioration. The system could lose millions before triggering any automatic shutdowns. I'd been meaning to build in more sophisticated safety mechanisms, eventually. But there were always more urgent priorities, more strategies to develop, more opportunities to capture. And honestly, as long as I was there watching it, those mechanisms weren't necessary. But I wasn't there anymore. And the system didn't know that. I was home by 11:30 a.m. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Chelsea, 15-minute subway ride from the office. I made myself tea and sat by the window, watching the city move below. My personal laptop sat on the table, logged into the monitoring dashboard I'd built years ago. Not for the firm's systems, those were locked now, but for market data feeds that showed me exactly what the APEX system would be seeing. I estimated it would take about a week. That's how long before the market conditions would shift enough that my absence would matter. The models would continue trading on outdated calibrations. Small losses would accumulate into significant ones. By the time anyone noticed something was wrong, it would be too late to fix it quickly. I was wrong about the timing. It took 4 days. On Thursday afternoon, my personal phone buzzed with a text from James, one of the senior traders I'd worked with. "Vic, something's off with the quant desk. Correlation trades are bleeding money. You hear anything?" I didn't respond. 20 minutes later, another text, this time from Sarah at reception. "They're having an emergency meeting about trading losses. Everyone's freaking out. Miss you." I put my phone face down and drank my tea. By Friday afternoon, according to James's increasingly concerned messages, the trading floor was in crisis mode. The APEX system was executing trades based on correlation patterns that had shifted 3 days ago. It was buying assets that were now negatively correlated instead of positively correlated, selling positions that should have been increased. The losses weren't catastrophic yet, just consistent. 500,000 here, 300,000 there. But they were accelerating. And nobody knew how to fix it because nobody understood the underlying models. The young risk manager Hastings had brought in was completely lost. He could read the loss reports, but had no idea what was causing them or how to stop them. The weekend passed slowly. I spent Saturday reading in Central Park. Sunday I went to a museum. My phone was off. I knew what Monday would bring. When I turned my phone back on Monday morning, I had 53 missed calls. Not to my personal cell. Most people didn't have that number. To my old work phone, which I'd accidentally forgotten to return. They deactivated the calling capability. But messages still came through. The voicemails were a symphony of panic. The first few were confused. Junior analysts asking if I knew why the correlation models weren't adapting to market changes. Then they got desperate. Hastings's voice, stripped of its usual confidence. Victoria, we need to discuss the quantitative systems immediately. Please call back. Then they got frantic. Arthur Pemberton himself, the founding partner, back from London. Victoria, this is Arthur. I just learned what happened. I need you to call me directly. We need your help. I deleted them all, made coffee, read the financial news. Meridian Capital Partners was bleeding. It was Tuesday before I checked the trading reports through my market data access. The Apex system had lost $11.3 million in 6 trading days. The losses were accelerating because the models were doubling down on failing strategies. That's how algorithmic trading works, when the underlying assumptions are wrong. The system interprets losses as temporary dislocations and increases positions to capture the reversion, except in this case, there was no reversion coming. The market had changed and the models hadn't adapted. I learned what those 6 days looked like from inside through James. We met for drinks 2 weeks later, and he told me everything. Monday after I left, Hastings held a meeting with the quantitative team. 6 people crammed into the conference room, 3 of them junior analysts who'd never touched the core algorithms. Victoria's departure won't affect our trading operations, Hastings announced. The models are automated and functioning normally. I want daily reports on performance. The team lead, a guy named Robert, who'd been with the firm for 3 years, raised his hand. The Apex system requires constant monitoring and adjustment. Victoria was making changes almost daily based on market conditions. Then you'll continue making those changes, Hastings said. We have the code. We have the infrastructure. This is what I'm paying you for. Robert looked at him with something between disbelief and horror. With respect, none of us have access to the core system. Victoria maintained that separately, and even if we had access, it would take months to understand the architecture well enough to make informed modifications. Figure it out, Hastings snapped. You're quantitative analysts. Analyze. That was Monday. By Tuesday, the first losses appeared. Small enough that Hastings dismissed them as normal variance. By Wednesday, the losses were consistent across multiple strategies. Robert escalated to Hastings, explaining that the correlation matrices hadn't been updated since I left. Hastings ordered them to update the matrices. Robert tried to explain that he didn't have access to the systems that generated those updates. Hastings accused him of making excuses. By Thursday, the losses hit 2 million. The new risk manager finally noticed and sent out an alert. Hastings called another emergency meeting. Someone shut down the losing strategies until we figure out what's wrong, he ordered. We can't, Robert said quietly. The system is integrated. Shutting down one strategy affects the others, and we don't have administrative access to make those changes. Who has administrative access? Hastings demanded. Victoria, Robert replied. The room went silent. Then get it from her, Hastings said. That's when the voicemail started. By Friday, with losses at 4.7 million, Arthur Pemberton got involved. He'd been in London during my termination and was furious when he learned what happened. He tried calling me himself, left 3 voicemails asking me to please call him back, that this was a mistake, that we needed to talk. I appreciated that Arthur at least acknowledged it was a mistake, but appreciation doesn't undo humiliation. By Monday of the second week, the situation had escalated from problem to crisis. The Apex system had lost $11.3 million in 6 trading days. Client accounts were affected. The firm's reputation was at stake. The board of directors called an emergency meeting for Tuesday morning. Hastings walked into that meeting thinking he could manage the situation. He was catastrophically wrong. I learned about the meeting from a Wall Street Journal article that went up Wednesday morning. Meridian Capital Partners faces trading crisis following personnel changes. Sources say losses exceed 15 million. The article was devastating. It quoted anonymous traders describing the chaos. It mentioned that the firm's founding partner had been out of the country during key personnel decisions. It noted that Sentinel Holdings, the majority shareholder, declined to comment. What the article didn't mention was what happened during that board meeting. One of the board members, a woman named Eleanor Ashford, who'd been on the board for 12 years, asked a direct question. Who authorized the termination of Victoria Chen? Hastings raised his hand, still confident despite the mounting losses. I did, as part of cost optimization initiatives. Were you aware she was the sole architect and maintainer of our proprietary trading systems? Eleanor asked. Hastings hesitated. I was informed that the systems were automated and could be maintained by the existing team. By whom were you informed of this? The analysis was based on role descriptions and compensation benchmarking. Hastings said. Translation, he'd made assumptions based on spreadsheets. Eleanor looked at Arthur Pemberton. Arthur, were you consulted before this termination? I was in London, Arthur said, his voice tight with anger. I learned about it after the fact. So our CFO, who has been with this firm for 8 weeks, terminated our most critical quantitative strategist without consulting the founding partner or conducting technical due diligence. The temperature in the room dropped. Another board member, Marcus Wellington, leaned forward. What's the current loss total? $15.2 million as of yesterday's close, the head of trading reported. And projections if we can't resolve this. If the current trajectory continues, we could lose $40 million before we're forced to shut down the strategies entirely, which would eliminate approximately 70% of our trading revenue. The board went silent. Eleanor Ashford stood up. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to fix this crisis immediately. And then we're going to have a very serious conversation about oversight and fiduciary responsibility. She looked at Hastings. Get Victoria Chen back here. Pay her whatever it costs. Apologize however you need to. Just fix this. That's when my personal cell phone rang. Wednesday afternoon. Caller ID showed private. I answered. Ms. Chen. This is Eleanor Ashford from Meridian's board of directors. Her voice was professional, controlled, but I could hear the stress underneath. I'm calling to discuss your recent departure and explore options for resolving our current situation. I'm listening, I said. We need your expertise to stabilize our trading systems. I'm authorized to offer you a consulting contract at your previous annual compensation for 1 month of work, plus a performance bonus tied to recovery of profitability. $340,000 for 1 month. That was substantial, but it wasn't nearly enough. I appreciate the offer, I said calmly, but my requirements extend beyond compensation. What do you need? Eleanor asked. First, a formal written apology from Trevor Hastings acknowledging his statements about my contributions were inaccurate, circulated to all staff. Agreed, she said without hesitation. Second, restoration of my position as senior quantitative strategist with a seat on the investment committee. I want input on strategic decisions, not just technical implementation. There was a pause, muffled conversation. Agreed, Eleanor said. Third, a 3-year employment contract with compensation increased to $420,000 annually, plus standard performance bonuses. I won't fix your systems just to be fired again when the crisis passes. Another pause, longer this time. Ms. Chen, that's a significant increase. The alternative is losing $40 million and shutting down 70% of your trading operations, I said. Which would you prefer? I need to discuss with the board. Take your time, I replied. But every day you wait, your losses compound. Market conditions are shifting away from your current model assumptions. By Friday, the damage might be irreversible. She called back 40 minutes later. We accept your terms, all of them. Can you start tomorrow? I'll be there at 8 a.m., I said. And Ms. Chen, thank you. Don't thank me yet, I replied. Let's see if I can actually fix this. I walked into Meridian's building Thursday morning through the same revolving doors I'd exited 10 days earlier. Sarah at reception looked up and her face transformed. "Victoria, you're back." "For now," I said. But the way she smiled made me think maybe permanently. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt different. I wasn't walking into an execution. I was walking into a negotiation I'd already won. Eleanor Ashford met me in the executive lobby. She was in her late 60s, gray hair styled impeccably, wearing a navy suit that meant serious business. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking my hand firmly. We went directly to the executive conference room. The entire quantitative team was there. Robert, James, 3 junior analysts, the new risk manager who looked absolutely terrified. They all looked exhausted. Dark circles, rumpled clothes, the hollow expression of people who'd spent 10 days watching millions disappear. They looked at me like I was salvation. "Show me everything," I said. Sitting down at the head of the table, Robert pulled up the system diagnostics on the main screen. "Apex has been in active trading mode since you left. We've lost 18.4 million to date. The correlation models are executing on outdated matrices. Volatility parameters are misaligned with current market conditions. Risk limits haven't been adjusted for the new regime." "Client impact?" I asked. 73 institutional accounts affected. 2 clients have requested account reviews. 1 threatened to pull their assets. I nodded, opening my personal laptop. Not the company laptop they'd confiscated, my own system. "Okay, first, I need full administrative access restored immediately. Robert, coordinate with IT." For the next 8 hours, I performed emergency surgery on the Apex system. It wasn't quick. You can't fix 10 days of deterioration in one afternoon. But I stopped the bleeding, shut down the strategies that were hemorrhaging money, updated the correlation matrices to reflect current market structure, recalibrated volatility parameters based on the past 2 weeks of data, adjusted position sizing to account for the new risk environment. By 4 p.m., the losses had stopped. By close of market at 4 p.m., we were flat for the day, not profitable yet, but not losing. The relief in the room was overwhelming. Robert actually put his head down on the table. "I thought we were finished," he admitted. "You almost were," I said. "These systems require constant attention. They're not appliances you can just turn on and forget." Eleanor Ashford came down to the trading floor at 5 p.m. "Ms. Chen, the board would like to meet with you tomorrow morning." "What time?" I asked. 7:30 a.m., and please, bring your recommendations for preventing this situation from recurring. I spent that evening documenting everything I should have documented 11 years ago. System architecture maps, model calibration procedures, emergency shutdown protocols, succession planning for critical quantitative roles, knowledge transfer requirements, all the things I'd been too busy to formalize. The board meeting Friday morning was intense. 15 directors around a massive table, Eleanor Ashford at the head. Arthur Pemberton looking relieved but shaken. Trevor Hastings sitting off to one side, isolated. I presented my documentation and recommendations. Mandatory documentation standards for all quantitative strategies. Multiple team members, trained on each critical system. Technical review requirements before any personnel changes affecting trading operations. Investment committee seats for senior quantitative staff. Regular knowledge transfer sessions and cross-training programs. The board listened, asked intelligent questions, approved everything unanimously. Then Eleanor said something unexpected. "Ms. Chen, the board has discussed your situation at length. Beyond the consulting arrangement we've agreed to, we'd like to offer you a permanent position as Chief Quantitative Officer." I blinked. CQO. That was C-suite. Reporting directly to the CEO. That was Hastings's level. The position includes full authority over quantitative strategies and risk management, a permanent seat on both the investment committee and executive team, plus substantial equity participation in the firm. She slid a folder across the table. The number on the contract made my breath catch. $650,000 annually, plus bonuses tied to trading performance, plus equity grants. It was almost double my previous compensation. We need someone who actually understands how this firm generates returns, Eleanor continued. Not someone who thinks profitability comes from spreadsheet optimization. She looked at Trevor Hastings as she said it. He sat frozen, his face carefully blank. Arthur Pemberton leaned forward. Victoria, I should have been here. I should have stopped this before it started. That's my failure, and I apologize unreservedly. It still wasn't enough. An apology doesn't undo being called historically irrelevant, but it was more than Hastings had offered. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, Eleanor replied. Take the weekend. I went back to my temporary office on the 42nd floor. Except it wasn't temporary anymore. They'd moved my belongings from my old office and upgraded me to a corner office with views of the Hudson River, the office that had been Hastings. James found me there an hour later. So the rumor mill says you're the new CQO? Maybe, I said. What happened to Hastings? Reassigned to portfolio analysis. Some internal position with no client contact. I heard he's on the 23rd floor now. Interior office, no windows. I couldn't help but smile. Hastings had gone from CFO with a corner office to a back office analyst role with no view. The poetry was almost too perfect. Are you going to take it? James asked. I looked around the office and 10 days ago, I'd been fired from this building, called overpaid and historically irrelevant. Humiliated in front of everyone I worked with. Now I was sitting in the CFO's former office, being offered his equivalent position at nearly double my previous salary. Yeah, I said. I think I am. I called Eleanor that afternoon and accepted. The announcement went out firm-wide Monday morning. Meridian Capital Partners is pleased to announce the appointment of Victoria Chen as Chief Quantitative Officer, effective immediately. Ms. Chen brings 11 years of quantitative expertise and will oversee all algorithmic trading operations, risk management, and strategic development. She will serve on both the investment committee and executive leadership team. My inbox exploded with congratulations. Sarah from reception sent me a gif of someone doing a victory dance. Even traders from other firms reached out, having heard through the industry grapevine. But the message I remember most came from Robert. You earned this 10 years ago. Glad the firm finally figured it out. Let's grab lunch, and you can teach me how you pulled this off. I never got that lunch with Robert. The first month as CQO was chaos, rebuilding the quantitative team, implementing proper documentation systems, creating redundancy so no single person could ever be as critical as I'd been, training multiple team members on each system. But I also did something Hastings would never have understood. I gave Robert a massive raise and promoted him to Director of Quantitative Research. I promoted 3 of the junior analysts who'd worked insane hours trying to fix my systems. I hired 4 new quants and paid them above market rate. Because I understood something about quantitative trading that Hastings never would. You can't optimize talent like you optimize costs. The best people generate returns that dwarf their compensation. Cutting salaries to save money is like removing the engine to make your car lighter. My first quarter as CQO. The quantitative desk generated $28 million in returns. We recovered the $18 million we'd lost, plus another $10 million in profit. By the end of my first year, we generated $97 million, the highest annual returns in the firm's history. The board approved everything I recommended: new infrastructure, expanded team, advanced risk systems. My equity grants became substantially valuable as the firm's overall valuation increased. Trevor Hastings lasted 6 months in his reassigned role before leaving. I heard through the rumor mill that he'd taken a CFO position at some startup in Miami. I looked up the company later. It folded 8 months after he joined. Something about cash flow problems and poor operational decisions. Some people never learn. 2 years after becoming CQO, I was in my office reviewing quarterly results when Eleanor Ashford stopped by. She'd stepped down from the board, but still consulted occasionally. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "After the crisis, we conducted a full investigation into Hastings's hiring and decision-making. And?" I asked. "He was brought in by Sentinel Holdings with explicit instructions to cut costs by 20% within 6 months. They didn't care how, just wanted the numbers improved." "So he was following orders," I said. "He was following orders stupidly," Eleanor corrected. "A competent CFO would have understood the difference between cost centers and profit centers. You weren't a cost. You were the reason we had profits to optimize." "Is that why Sentinel sold their stake?" I asked. "Sentinel had divested their position in Meridian 6 months into my tenure. Partially," she admitted. "After the crisis and the press coverage, they decided our firm was too complex for their usual cost-cutting playbook. They sold to a group of institutional investors who actually understand financial services." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "You know what I learned from all this, Victoria. The most expensive mistake a company can make is underestimating the value of expertise. Hastings tried to save $300,000 in salary and nearly destroyed $200 million in operations." After she left, I pulled up Hastings's LinkedIn profile. His Miami startup had failed. He was currently listed as a consultant. His profile picture still showed him in an expensive suit, trying to look confident. I closed the browser and went back to work. 3 years after the crisis, Meridian had grown to manage $400 million in assets. We'd acquired 2 smaller trading firms and integrated their operations. I led the technical integration for both. We had the systems to handle it now, documented, robust, with multiple people trained on every critical function. I built a team of 19 quantitative analysts who understood the models as well as I did. Better in some areas. That was the goal. Make myself replaceable. Make sure the firm could function without any single person being critical. The irony was that making myself replaceable made me more valuable, because I wasn't just managing algorithms anymore. I was building institutional knowledge and a culture of quantitative excellence. 5 years after the crisis, I got a message through LinkedIn from Trevor Hastings. "Victoria, I know this is unexpected, but I'm working with a firm that needs quantitative expertise, and I thought of you. Would you be open to discussing a consulting engagement competitive rates?" "Of course." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to reply with something about numbers not adding up to anything meaningful. But mostly, I just felt tired of holding on to anger. I replied simply, "Thanks for thinking of me, but I'm not taking outside work currently. Best of luck with your project." He never responded. I didn't expect him to. Some stories don't need elaborate endings. Sometimes you just move on and build something better. I'm still Chief Quantitative Officer at Meridian Capital Partners. 7 years after the crisis, the firm manages $800 million in assets. We employ 240 people across 3 offices. I have a team I trust, systems that work, documentation that ensures nobody is irreplaceable, including me. I could leave tomorrow and the firm would continue. Not because I'm not valuable, but because I built value into the structure itself. I learned something crucial from those 10 days when everything fell apart. Your value isn't in being irreplaceable. Your value is in building systems that outlast you, in training others to carry the work forward, in making invisible work visible and valued. Because the moment your work becomes visible, you become powerful. Not the kind of power Hastings wielded, based on cost-cutting and spreadsheets. Real power, based on expertise and results. The kind of power that gets you a seat at the executive table. The kind of power that changes your title from Senior Quantitative Strategist to Chief Quantitative Officer. The kind of power that lets you watch someone lose $42 million, learning exactly how much they need you, and then lets you fix it, keep the office, and triple your salary. Thanks for sticking with this story. If you enjoyed watching someone learn the hard way that expertise isn't a line item you can optimize away, hit that subscribe button. Share this with anyone who's ever been told their specialized knowledge doesn't justify their compensation. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just being so essential that when they fire you, they destroy themselves, and then making them pay triple to fix it.